Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handi Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras, and joining me today in our studio is Marie Eldredge. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Marie is an educator with Handi Quilter, and let's just get the obvious out of the way. Marie designed and made and quilted this spectacular quilt hanging behind us on this wall. This is really beautiful quilt.
Thank you.
Tell us the name of it.
Actually, the name of it is Together, and there's kind of a story. I didn't do everything alone. It was a lot of collaboration on it, so we might get to that.
Yeah, let's get to that later. But I just wanted to start out the episode showing this example of your work because it's really spectacular. So let's go back though and talk about how you started out. Do you come from a family of quilters?
I do. Not necessarily a big quilting, but every once in a while you'd put a quilt on and all the kids would play underneath and maybe push a needle up.
A hand quilting frame.
Hand quilting frame, yep. Started clear back when. And then finally when I got in high school I started doing my own quilts. And you know, you do quilts for special occasions, for people, for things, you know, charities, those kind of things. So that's kind of how I started. When anybody got married, I made a quilt. And then all winter long, you had a quilt set up so you could hand quilt. Very traditional. Yeah,
and were your grandmothers quilters, your mother, or any other family members?
I could beg my mother to come and help if it was for someone in the family, but it was not her favorite thing to do. But she helped, so you know, that's what you do. Is everybody helps, does a few stitches, and while you do it, you think about who you're doing it for, and that makes it all the more special. So.
And then, what kind of quilts were you making? I imagine fairly traditional.
Fairly traditional, and you know, I started out cutting them with a little template, so when it got to the rotary cutter, that was really boosted things along a little bit farther. So, yeah, very traditional. I started out. So.
And then, how did you move into working as a quilter as a profession?
Okay, so I was visiting with my mother in this little retirement town in the bottom of Utah, and we passed a garage sale, and so they had to stop, and when we stopped, this lady had hundreds of fat quarters for sale. And so
can't pass that up.
You can't pass that up, right?
No.
So, but you know how we buy fabric? You have to touch it and put the colors together. And she already had all of these stacks, you know, like she had purchased them in coordinating colors. And she had them all in these nice bins. But my husband was like, just buy it all and let's go, you know? And I was like, no, that's not how we buy fabric. So I said, you just go ahead and go get something, you know, go get a pop, whatever, but I'm going to go.
So you didn't take it all?
I did not take it all. I'm like, what was I thinking?
Right.
But that's not how we buy fabric. So I bought like 500 pieces of fabric. And even in the quilts that you'll see today, some of those are a little bit from that stash.
So you ended up with this enormous stash in one fell swoop.
And so I was like, I got to learn to make quilts a lot faster than this hand quilting thing that takes all winter.
Right.
So I started asking around, and that's where I came across Handi Quilter. And at first I rented, and so every Thursday I would go down to the studio. They would help me. They taught me everything. They'd check your tension. It was like training school. Plus, we ended up turning out to be really good friends. So I did that for a couple of years until I finally got kind of pushed out of the nest and bought my own machine and started doing it on my own. And then about 2 years ago, they called and said, oh, we have an opening for an educator, so would you like to come and work for Handi Quilter? And I thought, would I like to? Yeah, I could.
So up to that point, you weren't long-arming for pay. You were just long-arming for your own, you're doing your own quilts on your own long-arm machine.
I was doing quilts on my own. I did some for friends and family.
Okay.
Yeah, so you always end up doing a few for somebody.
And now you work full-time as an educator, leading retreats. You were talking about a recent retreat.
A recent retreat we just had. We always have people come from all over, but this last retreat, we had someone from...
And this is in Salt Lake.
In Salt Lake. So we had someone from Mexico, someone from Australia, someone from Brazil, and someone from Sweden. All came for you know, like out of 16 people, you get those
Right.
kind of, you know, but it's awesome.
It
I
just
love
shows
having
the global nature
yes,
of it.
Yes, and I love having the quilters come. You learn their stories and get to meet them, and you know, it's just fun. I love teaching. I love the people.
That's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about some of the quilts that you've made. And what types of quilts do you like to make for yourself?
You know, I like to do everything. You know, as soon as I see something new, a new tool or a new technique or something like that, then I want to try it. So a lot of times I'll see something, I'm like, oh, I got to make a quilt so I can use that on it. So I've started out pretty traditional, and then I've been forced out of my comfort zone and tried some different things. So one of the ones that I was, you know, that really pushed me out of the box was we had a workshop at our studio, and we had a bunch of surface design, a quilt guild that was, well, it wasn't not a quilt guild, but it's a surface design group, and they came, and it was more art kind of form. And I think it was Katie Pasquini that came and taught the workshop. And so we did 3 days working with color and shapes and different things like that. After it was all done, then I put together a quilt of one of the sections of what we had done, and this first quilt that you'll see is the result of that, which really is totally not traditional.
Oh, what's the name of the quilt?
That one is sea and green.
Okay.
And it just has a lot of turquoise and blue and greens, and then probably my favorite part of it is the border. And the border has a lot of different quilting in it, a lot of different kinds of fills, and then they kind of puzzle in together. So the border on that one's really probably the funnest, but it's so unique that everybody's like, where'd that one come from? So
It's
real
gorgeous.
contemporary.
It's really gorgeous. So how do you design your quilting? So for something like that, do you when you start out quilting, do you know where you're going to go?
Usually with that one, it was like I took a painting and then cropped it down to about a 3x5 size, and then tipped it on an angle and then blew it up and made it huge. So that's how that one came about. I do a lot of sketching and drawing. Sometimes it's just graph paper, sometimes I create it on the computer, sometimes it's the colors and the fabric that inspire me to get it going, and sometimes I just draw it out and then try and put it together. But I always draw out the quilting and try and figure out how I'm going to quilt it. So the next one that we're seeing here, this is one that there's just a whole lot of open space for quilting. And so lots of room to draw and decide what you're going to do and try and bring it together. It's actually just a lot of little fills that make an amazing design and a secondary design. So they don't, and this is again out of my comfort zone. This is more kind of a modern look to it. But it was really fun to make, and I really enjoyed. I like the colors, I like how the boxes fit together, and I like how there's the secondary design on it.
And what's it called?
And this one is called Tiki. And it's funny, if you look at it, there's some of the shapes look very maybe Hawaiian or Polynesian. Just the angle of the quilting and how it comes across, you get kind of that feel for it. So that one we named together after you look at it and you go, oh, this is totally Polynesian or something. Has that kind of a
Did you
look to it.
design the quilt top itself?
I did.
Okay.
I always design all of my own. I think I've
Okay.
done maybe a few patterns back in the day, but I always create my own.
And did
So,
you do that for work, for for
Just-
a demonstration of some sort, or?
mostly for me.
Okay.
That's just my thing, how I like to roll.
So
I
even
like
though it
to-
was out of your comfort zone, it was your own decision to get out of your comfort zone and to
Right.
try something new and
Right,
stretch
right.
your own aesthetic sense.
Right. And sometimes when I end up doing something, it's because of work. And so one day I was at work and they put a new part on my machine and said, I want you to try this, take this home, and try it. And at the same time, I had to teach a class on feathers and fills. So, I could
Two
make
birds, one stone.
good use of my time there. So this quilt happened because of that assignment, which, how tough is that? Go home and sew,
Right,
go home
right,
and quilt, right? So I just put this on. I started out with a straight border and just started using a curve to make the center vein for the feathers, and then I just put all the different feathers on that, possibly we could use in this class, and then started adding to that with different fills and this turned out to be one of those serendipity things that turns out much better than anything you could have planned.
Right.
Just because you started quilting. So that one was kind of fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's talk about the quilt that's hanging behind us, Together, which you made for IQA, International Quilt Association. And this is going to be the raffle quilt in Houston at Quilt Festival in 2014, correct?
Correct.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful.
Well, it was really an honor to be asked, and we're happy to do it. I actually had a lot of help on this as far as when we first started out, and that's kind of how it got its name, is we worked on it together. We did all the indigo fabrics. Those are from Brenda Growls, our director, so she kind of was together with us. We all kind of came up with the plan of how we were going to quilt it and how we were going to do the design, the pattern for the quilt, those kind of things. And then every step along the way we did together, but when it got to the quilting, then life kind of gets in the way, and everybody had different things going on. I was like, oh, I love to quilt. I'll take it home. I'll take care of that. So the quilting, I did all of it, but really, the best part of doing this was that it was a collaboration and that we enjoyed working on it together. So that's how we finally came up with the name for it.
And you've got, it looks like, is that machine embroidery along the vine in the outer border?
It's actually done with the long arm.
Okay.
And just done with a green thread, a double thread, I think it is. There's some applique. All of the vine is appliqued on, and the stars are something that they request that you have at least 5 of the 5-point stars on it, and so that's part of the tradition of these quilts that passes on. Then there are the ruching flowers that were added to the vine just to add a little attention there. But each of these different circles, there was some computerized quilting done on this, and it was just the bones, or kind of a skeleton shape, was added in the center of these larger blocks. And then I went back in and filled in, put the feathers and the frills and different things like that to, it really, being all that white and all that plain space,
Right.
Lots of places for the quilting to show.
It really does show, and it's spectacular. About how long do you estimate it took you to do the quilting on this?
I think the whole quilt has about 250 hours in it.
Okay.
So a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, whoever gets to take it home from Quilt Festival will be ecstatic. I can't imagine that they won't be. So.
It's so traditional. I think it should appeal to a lot of people. I think that it would.
Yeah, it definitely has a traditional appeal, but who wouldn't want this quilt? Absolutely. So the title Together came about because you worked on it with your coworkers?
Right. The other educators in the Handi Quilter studio, we all worked together, and that's what made it so much fun, is doing it together. And that's why we decided on the name, is because we had worked so much together on the most of the design parts of it.
Well, it really is spectacular, and I can't imagine that, whoever wins this in Houston is just going to be so ecstatic to take it home with them. I can't imagine anybody wouldn't want this in their home. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Marie. This was really wonderful, and thank you for bringing your quilts to show us.
Yes, I'm glad to. It's nice to be here. Thank you for asking.
Be sure to join us again on Quilters Newsletter TV for more lessons with Marie, where she's going to be showing us some of her techniques for long arming. We hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handi Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.